Program Manager and Certified Vet Tech here at Zen Habitats, and we have a special show called Kasey Talks Critters, where I invite guests who have expertise in different reptile fields that we can chat just about a particular animal and focus on them. So today we're talking about colubrids. So for those of you who don't know, colubrids are basically all of the rat snakes. So our corn snakes, milk snakes, king snakes, garter snakes, bull snakes, so many different ones. Basically all of the rat snakes. And today my guest is Lila. Lila Stratman. She is a full-time biology student, but you might know her better for being the Goblin Queen over on TikTok. She's got a great following with so many really great videos, so much great content about reptile education and teaching others how to care for reptiles appropriately. So Lila's really awesome. So welcome, Lila. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for that introduction, Kasey. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. So who do you have with you today?
This is General Tullius. He is my black rat snake. I got him from Fresh Start Rescue here in North Carolina, which is an amazing rescue that if y'all haven't heard of, you should absolutely go support them because they are amazing. And he is by far one of my favorites because he has just the best temperament and is one of my favorite animals to use for education.
Yeah, absolutely. I love a good rat snake. Rat snakes are just amazing. I'm a big fan for sure. And he's a big boy, which is
Yeah,
so cool.
yeah, he's getting huge. He's going to get an upgrade here soon
Oh,
for his enclosure because he's getting so big.
oh, wow, so cool. So I guess we can kind of delve into like, how did you start working with reptiles?
That's kind of a that's kind of a funny story actually. So I was a combat engineer in the Marine Corps, and I one day like it had been a goal, a life goal of mine always to have a blue tongue skink. And one day I was like, you know what? I've saved up enough where I have the funds to get one. I'm just going to go ahead and get one. So I got the setup. I don't recommend anybody do this while they're serving in the military, by the way. This was a very bad decision on my part. I should have waited. But I ended up getting a blue tongue skink. I kept him in a 40 gallon at the time, which again, I also very much don't recommend, but I think it's important to highlight how we learn along the way. So that was my first reptile. And then when I started like actually working with them, it mostly began with my creating enclosures. I used to create custom reptile enclosures and I would vend at expos and sell them. And so I originally had a business called Lila's Lizards, and that was basically where I sold my various custom enclosures. And then I got on social media and it's sort of grown since then.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? And now you're basically a full-time content creator and you have a great following. So that's really amazing. And that just shows people that if you want to work with reptiles or if you want to work with animals, there's so many outlets and you can go with so many different directions. And sometimes you don't even know where you're going to end up. Like for me, I didn't know I was going to end up in the retail space, the retail pet space. And I'm sure Lila didn't expect to be a social media person either.
No,
You know?
not in 1,000 years. Like I think that my space that I occupy here on TikTok is primarily like for lack of a better name for our community, like the ethical reptile keeping community. And I have a Discord server where I've made so many good friends, and I'm just super grateful for like the ethical keeping community. And social media is such an amazing thing with how much you can find your niche, especially here on TikTok. So, I think a lot of people are afraid to get on social media because of, I guess, how cruel people can be with when it comes to like the pet community as a whole. I mean, you were a veterinary technician, like you know how nuts people can be, especially in like the dog and cat space.
Yeah.
But like the ethical community, I found is so welcoming. We have so many young content creators. I just turned 23. I have friends on here who are 16, 19, 20, and they're doing great with their just starting their education career. So like literally anybody can do it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I really try to show that in this series that anyone who is very interested in working with animals, there is an outlet for you. You just got to find it and fit in.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I guess let's talk a little bit about colubrids or rat snakes. I think for I might just say rat snakes. If I say rat snakes, I'm referring to all colubrids.
Yeah.
Um, I might just slip out say rat snake, but I'm really talking about all colubrids.
Hmm.
So why do you think colubrids are so cool?
Oh gosh, that is such a good question. So colubrids are my favorite family of snakes. The family Colubridae is actually the largest of the snakes. Colubrids inhabit every continent except for Antarctica. They are such a massive family. So that includes rat snakes, corn snakes. Corn snakes are technically rat snakes. Garter snakes, vine snakes, hognose snakes, the list goes on. So they're such a diverse group of snakes. And if I'm going to speak specifically to rat snakes, I have several rat snakes. This is my black rat snake. And as you can see, he's very, very curious. He has an amazing temperament. When I pull him out of the enclosure to do, whether it's to film or just to do some training for like him getting used to handling, he is just so curious. He'll pop his head right out and he'll climb right on me. I think that my experience with like rat snakes specifically is just them being very intelligent, very curious snakes. And in terms of their husbandry requirements, I personally believe that so rat snakes are a very diverse group of snakes in and of themselves. But if I'm going to speak to black rat snakes and corn snakes, even like Texas rat snakes, they are such a great entry level snake. The only thing is that they do get quite large. As you can see, he's almost 6 feet. But they're such a great entry level snake because of their temperament, because of how easy their care can be in comparison to like certain pythons and boas. And they have they're basically like garbage disposals for feeders too. They can eat just about anything. He gets a very diverse diet. General Tullius here. He finally decided to come out of his little birch round. Um, he gets fed anything from chicks to rodents to eggs. He gets fed a whole variety of rodents like hamsters, small guinea pigs, rats, mice. He
Yeah.
gets fed quail, he gets fed chicken. Like there's so many different things you can feed these guys. So if you ever like you'll never waste a feeder basically with these guys.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And right behind me is actually Phoenix, our corn snakes enclosure. And so it's definitely a little like juxtaposed next to your naturalistic enclosure. So we're doing very naturalistic options for her, but in
Hmm.
a not so subdued color palette.
Well, it's very pretty.
Well, I
Like,
do, but it gives her all of the things. But basically, I just wanted to go into saying, like, I agree with everything about the rat snakes and the corn snakes. Like, they are garbage disposals, and we feed Phoenix a very wide variety of prey items as well because she'll take them. And I think that's
yeah.
just really great to be able to provide that if your snake isn't picky. And in my experience, the corn snakes, the king snakes, and the rat snakes have all been very good eaters for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I
I
love.
think a lot of people, I can't tell you how many times I've had people on TikTok reach out to me or in my Discord server reach out to me and ask like, hey, like what can I do to get my ball python to eat?
Yeah.
Like, hey, what can I do to get my boa constrictor to eat? Ball pythons are definitely like a huge culprit in terms of feeding issues. So that's definitely the one I get the most. But pythons as a whole, I've seen people struggle with. And a big part of that is going to be husbandry because like I said, like corns and rats, they actually inhabit most of America. So their husbandry requirements are going to be very, very basic. And they're very hardy snakes. And so like that's why they're such a great entry level snake. With any snake, obviously, or any reptile, any pet in general, you're gonna have to do a bunch of research. But for these guys, I think that there are a lot of people recommend ball pythons for like an entry level snake. I highly disagree. I think corns and rats take the cake every time, even king snakes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's definitely something that I obviously you need to do research, but I definitely do consider that the corn snakes and the rat snakes to be a very good beginner snake. I hate to use the term
Mhm.
beginner, but I think it's a good.
Right. Well, for lack of a better word, like it's an entry level, like first snake,
Yes, simplified husbandry. And like the thing is, like, I don't want to say that they're very they're hardy, and they I don't want to say that they're like you can make mistakes with them and they'll be okay. Like I don't want to promote making
Yeah.
mistakes, obviously, but the thing is, like, they're pretty good. Like if you do make little slip ups, they do like they're not going to get dehydrated from like one day of not misting or like
Right, right, exactly.
stuff like that. Not saying that you should be neglecting your animals. That is definitely
Right,
not
of
what I'm
course.
saying. But yeah, I think it's funny with black rat snakes. A lot of my experience with them is with wild ones. So when I was working down in the DC, Maryland area, we would get tons of them in, unfortunately, like stuck on glue traps or things like that. So I've rescued a lot of black rat snakes over the years.
Oh my goodness, I can only imagine, especially with how people put like golf balls in their chicken coops to have them eat the golf balls and then die because they can't digest the golf ball, obviously. And I think that and glue traps are a huge one, especially with like rats and corns out in the wild. A lot of people are so afraid of snakes that they don't realize just how beneficial they are. If we're going to talk about like rats in the wild, for example, like black rat snakes are a huge culprit when it comes to eating eggs in a chicken coop. And I would much rather, as a chicken keeper, have a black rat than have a rodent problem in my chicken coop. So
100%. Yeah.
right, exactly. So, people will put these golf balls out so that they'll swallow it, and then, yeah, you've killed the rat snake, but now you have a rat problem.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have a very gentle, non-venomous, curious rat snake than have a rodent
Yeah.
problem.
Come take some of my eggs. I'll feed you eggs. Just, keep the rats at bay. That's all I ask.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
They're far better at rodent control than cats, for example.
for
Because like
sure.
that's why when people, not to get on like a soapbox here, but when people have like outdoor cats or barn cats and like, oh, it's my mouser, it's like, listen, we have mousers in the wild that aren't, going to be extremely detrimental to biodiversity. These guys are as good of a mouser as it gets.
Exactly. And again, not to go on another tangent, but there's this really great organization called Rats, and it's Raptors Are the Solution. So it's
Mhm.
about like helping raptor populations. But anyways, so
That's
yes,
so cool. I've never even heard of that.
oh yeah, so there's really great things. So yes, we need to keep our natural snake populations and our natural bird of prey populations up to take care of all of those rodents for
Mhm.
sure.
100%, 100%.
Now, so let's see. We talked a lot about your experience. So we'll talk more like your opinions about husbandry and stuff with rat snakes and corn snakes and colubrids in general.
Mhm.
So do you, why are they so popular as a pet, do you think?
I think that they're very popular as a pet. Well, for one thing, they are certainly an easier snake to breed. They That's part of why, like, we have so many like New Caledonian geckos, for example, is because of ease of breeding with a lot of colubrids. Not all colubrids, but like corns and rats, for example. Breeding is pretty easy, which makes them more accessible, because there are so many established like captive populations, which then you have more morphs and more genetic diversity on the market. And I think another, in terms of speaking to like the genetic diversity, I think that the amount of uh, morphs and the amount of like varied genetics in terms of what you can actually see is very interesting and makes them more desirable. Same thing with ball pythons, because like this is a black rat snake, but you can find a corn snake in like so many different colors. You
Mm-hmm.
have leucistic corns, you have albino corns, like you have Okatee corns. Like there's corns that are like deep, deep red. In terms of rat snakes, you have scaleless rat snakes, and I just think that like the morphology of of rats and corns in general is so interesting. If we're going to speak to colubrids as a whole, because I know we were talking about, because corns and rats are obvious. Well, I'd say corns specifically are the most common in terms of colubrids that you'll find in like pet stores and stuff, and probably kings are a close second. Um, but just the amount of genetic diversity is definitely appealing for a lot of people. And scaleless rat snakes also are very interesting. I have two scaleless rat snakes. I have a scaleless white-sided rat snake. Her name is Birthday Suit because she doesn't have scales. And I have a scaleless Texas rat snake. And I think that the scaleless gene is especially interesting because compared to like scaleless ball pythons, this is actually a naturally occurring genetic mutation. So you can see scaleless rats and corns in the wild. So it's not like with scaleless ball pythons, for example, you breed two scaleless head gene ball pythons to get maybe a fully scaleless ball python, and they lack the ventral scales, so their belly scales, and that is detrimental. Whereas with corns and rats, it's a naturally occurring genetic mutation, so they actually still have those ventral scales to protect them. So just lots and lots and lots of genetic diversity and very easy to breed. Sorry, I kind of went on for too long there, but
Love it. No, not at all. That's perfect. And I definitely agree because like with the morphs of corn, like with albinism and leucism and anrace, like you can get
yeah,
like any color corn snake you want for the most part. And same with your kings and your milk snakes too. Like
yeah,
so many variations for sure. Um,
yeah.
it goes on forever. Now we talked about them being a very good entry level species. So do you find anything tricky about them to establish?
I would say the one thing about rat snakes in particular, in terms of like our native rat snakes here, so your black rat snakes, your red rat snakes, your Texas rat snakes, is the size. This is a large snake. I mean, he's taller than me. I'm 5'4". He's about like 5.5 feet now.
Yeah.
So they are a large snake, which means that you are going to need a large enclosure. Their humidity requirements are easy. I think that these guys are great candidates for live planted bioactive because they're not like super heavy bodied, and they exhibit a lot of like arboreal behavior because they are semi-arboreal. And because they are semi-arboreal, because they are so active, because they get so large, I highly recommend having a much larger enclosure. Like obviously behind you, it looks like a 4x2x4. Am I?
Yes.
Yeah, which is like a perfect size because they have 4 feet of height. I am upgrading General Tullius here to a 5x3x3 here shortly. Hopefully, I'm just waiting for it to come in the mail because I want him to be able to exhibit more of that arboreal behavior and you will actually see these guys in the wild climbing trees like all the time. And they'll climb trees in order to get eggs in various birds' nests. So they're very, very active snakes. They are typically diurnal too. It depends on the season. Sometimes they're more crepuscular, but this guy, General Tullius, is definitely more diurnal. So they're active. They're very active during the day. This is a snake you'll be able to see move around, and you're going to want to give them a larger enclosure for that reason, because why would you want to keep a snake in a small box if you can't even see like them exhibit their natural behaviors,
100%. I totally am right there with you. And the reason why so Phoenix used to be in a 4x2x4, which is totally, I think, appropriate for a corn snake. In most cases, if it's a really large corn snake, you might want to go with something bigger. We had brought her to a reptile expo as like, I don't want to say like a sample animal, but basically like to show the enclosure. And we put her in a 4x2x4 for the show. And she was all over that thing the entire show. So we were like, okay, when we get home, we have to build her a 4x2x4. We have like, she needs it.
Right.
And she's been really great. So like one thing that I love about talking about eating eggs. So I don't know if you guys can see, but this is like hanging fruit baskets. So they look kind of like bird nests, and I will hide food in there for her.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's such a good idea for enrichment. I should clarify a 4x2 because I know a lot of people have been kind of going like bananas with saying like, oh, that enclosure's too small, that enclosure's too small, that enclosure's too small, when it's really like not that too small. A 4x2x2, which is a very accessible size for most people. Once you get bigger than a 4x2x2, it becomes more difficult and more expensive to find. But a 4x2x2, which is, a size you can find just about anywhere, is perfectly fine for a corn and rat snake. Bigger is always better, but that is like typically considered to be the minimum.
Yeah.
Obviously, General Tullius here is a much larger black rat. That's why I'm upgrading him. So it all depends on your individual animal as well. But yeah, the standard 4x2x2 is just fine. I like to see them exhibit that arboreal behavior.
Me too. I love it. So I think the one other thing that I would talk about, or I'd like to discuss with you that can be tricky with these guys, is that they make excellent escape artists. So I have found that especially corn snakes, they will get out of anything. They will try. So that's one that I definitely like to tell people to be cautious when they bring them home. Make sure your enclosure is completely sealed. Like there's no little tiny gaps that your little noodle can fit through, because they will find them and they will get through.
Yeah.
Small snake. But that's my experience keeping corn.
Oh yeah.
It's just
I especially when they're babies. So like if you or yearlings, you have to be extremely careful, because they can and they will escape. These are extremely intelligent snakes, just like extremely intelligent, and they will open doors. Like if you have sliding glass doors, they will find a way to open them if you give them the opportunity. They will slip through vents if you don't keep a grate over it. Like you have to ensure, double check that your doors are all the way closed. And these guys, I would definitely have locks for your doors.
Yes.
Locks are super important. Yeah. So locks for your doors, or for those of you, like if you have like a yearling or a baby or just a younger rat snake, and you say you're keeping it in a tub opening 40-gallon, just make sure that it is locking lid. Never ever anything that doesn't lock, because these guys can and will find a way out, because they are very, very intelligent.
Yes, they are. Absolutely. I definitely put that out there for first time rat snake keepers. Definitely. So then the next question I have is like, who do you think is the ideal keeper for rat snakes? Because I mean, there's such a variety. Who do you think it works for? Like, I know we talked about like entry level people, but like, I don't know. I'm kind of answering your own question. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. Don't apologize. Don't apologize. I think that the ideal, like, these are going to be a great snake for anybody who wants to watch a snake be a snake.
Yes.
If you want to watch an active snake, if you want to feed them a diverse diet, watch how they interact with their environment, this is the snake for you. I keep a large variety of species. I keep, reticulated pythons, Burmese pythons, ball pythons, boa constrictors. Like I have a very wide variety, and these guys are the most fun to watch, because they are very much like they're snakes. Like you watch them be snakes, like how you would in the wild. And I think that makes them perfect for anybody who wants to have a snake that they can watch and interact with, which is going to be a lot of like entry level keepers. It's also great for young keepers. Like if you have a classroom pet, for example, and you know how to take care of them properly, because there's a lot of neglected classroom pets. But if you're a teacher who can actually provide these guys with good enclosure and good husbandry, and you know how to properly handle where there's no like liability risk with the snake biting a child, or obviously I'm not too familiar with classroom pets because I never had them, but hypothetically, if I was a teacher and I had a classroom pet, it would be a corn or a rat snake, even a king snake. I just find that king snakes can be a bit more nippy, not because they're defensive, but because they are so food driven. Like
Yes.
king snakes, which is another member of the Colubrid family, are so food driven, and they also eat other snakes, so they will occasionally bite themselves.
Yes, we have a California king snake here in the office, and he's amazing. And he is also a garbage disposal, and I can get him to eat anything, and it's amazing. I love him. But he is very like the second, like he knows the sound of the tongs, like he's ready. Like But yeah, now, of course, because this is a Zen Habitats show, do you think we make a product that's great for colubrids?
Yes, I do. Zen Habitats are a great product because you guys have the 4x2x4 and extension kit, so you could even go bigger. Like you could go for a 6 or an 8 foot enclosure if you wanted to spring for something bigger to see them again exhibit like those arboreal behaviors and see how they interact with their environment, particularly if you're somebody that wants just one snake. And so you can dedicate a lot more room. Um, and then does Zen provide locks, or is that just something you would
So
add?
yeah, all of our enclosures come with these little wire locks, but if
Okay.
you are feeling, you can absolutely go to the hardware store or go to Amazon and get those big jewelry case locks if you
Hmm.
are feeling you want a little bit extra security or if you want an actual key lock. But these
Yeah.
prevent the doors. They just kind of slide in between the doors and it just like prevents it from sliding open.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is I like that y'all have a substrate shield that's clear for anybody who's into like botany. It's really interesting if you do like a live planted bioactive to be able to see like the root systems and be able to see like if you do like a full bioactive, you have a drainage layer to be able to see like those bioactive layers. I think is just like so cool to that it's clear down there.
Hmm. And sometimes in my bioactive enclosures, will sometimes get like mushroom growth and stuff. And I think it's so fascinating to see all like the mushroom roots. I know they're not
Oh my
roots, but
God.
yeah.
I love when I get fungi in my bioactives because it's a sign of like a really healthy bioactive. Even like people get really panicky about mold, like not to go off on a tangent about bioactives, but like people get really panicky about mold, and it's like no, 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 no. Like a mold bloom is like very common for the start of a bioactive. That's why you want to like establish your bioactive first and then place your animal in.
Exactly. But no, mold is good. Like all of the fungi is good.
Yeah.
Um, it's just to an extent, I'm gonna say mold is good if you have like a fully molded out enclosure. Obviously,
Right, that's not, yeah,
that's
but
not
if you have
good.
like, a good cleanup crew, your springtails will eventually get to it. And I think that people are a little bit too clean with their bioactives. I was actually having this conversation with another keeper. His name is Alan, and he's awesome, and he does a series on his TikTok where he talks about like proper bioactives and sort of the nuance with like more sterile bioactives versus more natural bioactives. And bioactives don't have to be like sterile because it's meant to mimic their natural environment. So, you know, there's beneficial bacterias that should be present, beneficial fungi that if you see them, that's a good sign. People are really afraid of sort of mimicking that natural environment, understandably, because there are like parasitic mites and various parasitic like worms that can potentially infect your snake if you were to say like go outside and just shove some random dirt outside. But like a good product is like any sort of beneficial bacteria promoter for
Mhm.
your soil, your substrate.
Yeah.
Um,
We actually sell one on our website from Josh's Frogs. It's like a bioactive booster and it works
yeah, yeah,
really
like that's
great.
perfect. Like
Yeah.
exactly.
Works really, really great for stuff like that to get that beneficial bacteria started because that's really the hardest thing. Because, like, if you don't have poo, essentially, you don't have the animal in there making bacteria. You have to
Right,
provide bacteria first.
right, exactly.
For sure. Um, so I guess next I would love to talk a little bit about questions from our fans. So I saw one was one that we had gotten was in regards to heat, and we've talked about this a little bit before. Overhead heat versus under tank heat.
Hmm.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So I'm gonna sip on my haterade when it comes to under tank heat. There is a time and a place for under tank heating. I use heat mats for my dubia roaches. For example, I breed dubia roaches. I breed a bunch of feeder insects for my lizards. So there is a time and a place for it. If it is monitored with a thermostat, that's super important because these things can overheat and start a fire so easily. So if it's monitored by a thermostat, they can also be good for supplemental heat in quarantine. But in terms of your permanent enclosure, your permanent housing for your animal, it is going to be, in my opinion, so important to provide overhead heating because when you look at like their natural habitat, overhead heating comes from the sun. And when you like actually look at from like a biological standpoint how these animals absorb heat, so these animals are exotherms. So what that means, not to like go on to like a
Nope, this is
tangent, but
exactly
I
what
am a bio student.
I wanted you to talk about it. This is exactly why I questioned it just the way I did.
Yeah, like I'm super into biology. I'm a veterinary bioscience student right now, so I'm really into this whole thing. So they are exotherms, meaning that they need heat sources outside of themselves. We are endothermic, so we produce our own heat internally. These guys thermoregulate with their environment, which is why you need a cool side and a warm side. In the wild, these guys thermoregulate with the sun. So you'll see them basking on like slate or basalt or whatever stone is present. They like to bask on stones a lot. You'll see them basking like by ponds a lot because typically, foliage is less thick there. They'll have more access to the sun, especially rat snakes. You'll see these guys bask in the wild all the time, and they need a variety of UV rays. So overhead heating provides UVA, and you should also be providing these guys with UVB, which is a very new thing. A lot of reptile keepers don't provide their snakes with UVB because this is such a new discovery in keeping that snakes benefit from UVB as well. So they need a heat source that will actually properly penetrate their skin. And it's proven that the best heat source for snakes, for lizards, is going to be halogen bulbs. So halogen bulbs are by far what I recommend. I recommend halogens, and I recommend linear UVB, not coil UVB. And there's a whole bunch of companies that do. Is it all right if I recommend specific companies?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay. I recommend Reptisun linear UVB or Arcadia linear UVB. And Arcadia is a really, really good company because they also sell halogens, and they have like really, really good care guides in terms of lighting that is very up to date, in my opinion.
They do, absolutely. And we actually do sell Reptisun and Arcadia products right on Zen Habitats website. For those of you who are not familiar with that, we have a bunch of accessories too. So we have that stuff now too. So it's all in one shop. But yeah, I love Arcadia lighting. Definitely hands above. Their care resources are really great too. And I think they're so awesome. Shelby, I did see a question about deep heat emitters. So I will use deep heat emitters for nighttime use typically because they don't produce any lighting. Where your halogen is going to produce UVA. Let me get that. Is it the infrared A? I get them so confused. So yes, the IRA, exactly. Zoe, you got it. Thank you for answering that question. So yes, you want to use physical light so that they get the visible IRA, and then the deep heat detector is great for nighttime use because it doesn't produce any actual like heat emitting light. I mean, visual. I can't talk. It doesn't produce any visual light. So I really do like that for nighttime use. I actually prefer them over ceramic heat emitters because they do penetrate better than a ceramic heat emitter.
The one thing I'll say is about deep heat emitters is they're great if, like, you obviously know, like, each individual keeper is going to know their environment best. A lot of reptiles, depending on how cold your home gets, don't actually need supplemental heat at night because night drops are more natural for them to have a drop in temperature at night. Like 60s, 70s. It all depends on your home and the species you're keeping. And I forgot to say this, but in terms of like under tank heating, like heat mats, the other thing is a lot of times, like, so heat comes from the sun, so it's coming from overhead. So if you have a species that's fossorial, like a sand boa, for example, it's going to be very unnatural for them to burrow and then have their heat source below them because typically they burrow and get cooler because they're getting away from the sun. So that is another issue with heat mats. But I
Yeah,
just
no,
forget.
absolutely. And you're right about the nighttime heat. I actually don't use, personally, I don't use it at night. The only animals that I use my DHPs on are our panther chameleons because
Yeah.
they're just sensitive little boys.
Super fragile guys. Yeah.
They're the only ones that I'm like, okay, you need consistent temperature constantly.
Right. I mean, they'll
Um,
get sick so fast.
Yeah, oh God. Anyways, um, but yeah, I think we went over a lot of really great Colubrid stuff. So now I kind of want to talk about stuff about you, if that's okay.
Okay.
So, if you were to give advice to someone who's looking to pursue a career similar to you, what would you recommend that what are some things that you would recommend?
So my biggest advice for anybody is to go to school.
Hmm.
I think like you don't have to. You can get a lot of knowledge through just your own research and through like various work experience. I am somebody who really values education in the United States. That is a very like it's a tricky thing because of how expensive it is. But for people who are younger, like people in high school, and I know how much it sucks to like have to pay for college and have student loans. I was in the military, so I literally like suffered the suck for years in order to have my post 9/11 GI Bill. But like education in high school, make sure that you're getting good grades so that you can get into a good college, you can get into a biological field, you can get into a zoological field. There are so many good STEM fields that you can go into that will give you a really solid background for anything zoology. Like I have like a whole bunch of notes down here about like the phylogeny of snakes because like I just think that it is so interesting, and you'll be able to connect concepts a lot easier if you go to college. And even if you don't go to college, like for example, like you went through veterinary technician school, like that is a great that's amazing education. Or if you're somebody who has your bachelor's, going to veterinary school, which is again super expensive, but like it is a very tricky thing because of how much money it is. But I'll
Yeah.
boil it down to just education is so important. Even if you don't want to get like your bachelor's, just keep reading, keep learning, and that'll give you a solid basis as to like how to understand academic literature, how to stay up to date with modern and ongoing research. Like I just mentioned, the UVB issue is very new in reptile keeping. So
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can see in the chat, we're talking about LED spotlights, and there's a little, not, I don't want to say a debate, but like using LEDs within your enclosures. And so if you're doing bioactive, you're going to need some sort of LED for your
Yeah.
plant growth. And so that is also new because like everyone is like, oh my God, LEDs are so bad for your animal's eyes. But really, it's not, it's really like, it's actually beneficial as long as it's not colored UVB or LEDs and stuff like that.
Yeah. I
Um,
use LEDs for all my bioactives.
oh, I saw Dakota is also in our chat who said you could drop out of high school and become a YouTuber, which is you got
I'm
it.
actually I'm a big fan of Dakota. It's
He's
crazy
a
that
great
he's in the
guy. I
chat
love
because I've been
Dakota's a really good friend. He's an awesome dude, and I'm really happy that he joined our live as well. But yeah, so I'm not recommending dropping out of high school, Dakota.
I didn't know he dropped out of high school. I've been watching his videos since like I was in high school. So,
Exactly. He's
which
crushing
wasn't that
it.
long ago, just so we're clear.
All right, so let's see. Okay, next question about Lila stuff. What is one common myth that you would like to debunk about your profession?
Oh, geez. That is such a good question. I think that people make it out to be a lot more dangerous than it is. Um, I've actually like Zoe's in the chat right now. We are discussing like I've had many conversations with her. She keeps a lot of species, and a lot of venomous. Like she's trained in venomous, and we were having a discussion about like if I wanted to get trained in venomous. And like I said, going back to the education thing, it really boils down to education. When I get bit by if I get bit by one of my reptiles, whether it's one of my monitor lizards or one of my, I actually have been bit by one of my colubrids. I got bit by my scaleless Texas rat snake. It's always the keeper's fault. It's not because, you know, you have this incredibly defensive snake that's out to get you, trying to eat you. Snakes are never, ever going to try and eat you. I mean, this guy, some people, like the, you know, most people, I'd say, because a lot of people are very uneducated in reptiles, would look at like General Tullius and they'd be like, oh, he's trying to eat you. This
Mhm.
is not a snake that would ever try to eat me because he couldn't.
No,
Like
you
this,
physically
you
can't.
know, how big is his look at me and look at the size of his digestive tract, you know?
Exactly. Like he physically can't do it. It's
Right.
just
So like people
he's not going to
make
spend
it
the
out to
energy
be
trying.
a lot more dangerous than it is. It is on the keeper to keep themselves safe and to keep their animals safe. And it's, you know, reptiles aren't out to get us. Like I definitely have more defensive reptiles. I have a tegu, a black and white tegu, which they're actually illegal here in my state. So I have to re-up my permit every year because I was grandfathered in, thankfully.
Mhm.
And he is by far my most defensive reptile. So I take precautions when I handle him.
Yeah.
I target train him. I make sure I'm wearing protective gear if I'm training him to be used to handling. It is 100% on the keeper. It is never on the animal. These animals are not out to get us.
That's right. You're absolutely right. And I would love to break the stigma that the majority of people have about being scared of reptiles. But I know it's going to take a long time before we get there. But if we keep
Yeah,
making fun, educational content with cute critters, it'll
right.
eventually happen. um, but let's see. So is there any challenges that you're facing in your current roles that you yeah, like any challenges that you might be battling right now with school or with any of your projects?
Well, so finances are always tricky.
Hmm.
That's a very, very real thing with reptile keeping. There is just realistically not a lot of money in reptile keeping. Even people who breed, a lot of people who breed as passion projects. I know that we had a conversation, Kasey, about you wanting to breed your crested geckos. Eventually, it was cresties, right?
Yep.
Like so, you know, and that's a passion project, obviously, for you. And like there just isn't a whole lot of money in it. So, you know, I have to work outside of just TikTok, for example. Like you know, I do content creation. It's my passion. I would love to have content creation be my full-time job, but it is very difficult to have that be my main source of income. I am fortunate enough, having served in the Marine Corps, I now get paid to go to college, and a lot of people don't have that opportunity, so that helps me out substantially. But you know, I'm paying, like I own this house by myself, so I'm covering my mortgage and my bills and then all the food for the animals. I have 30 animals in total. And budgeting is something I have to do monthly to make sure that everybody gets what they need. And then when it comes to upgrading, especially now that I live alone, and again, I'm fortunate enough where I have a lot of savings from my military service, so I can allocate that towards my animal care. But like it's definitely something in terms of upgrades that you have to plan ahead, plan over time. Like I wouldn't be able to buy all of my upgrades at once,
No.
because as your animals grow, give them bigger enclosures as you learn more. Because like the reptile keeping hobby is like I said, it is constantly changing,
Mhm.
constantly coming out with new findings. So, you know, UVB, I'm making sure everybody has UVB. I'm making sure that everybody gets bigger enclosures. I'm making sure that oh, this snake just got discovered that they really like spending time in the water. Okay, now I'm going to give them a much bigger water source and make sure that it's filtered, you know.
Yeah.
So financially, it's a challenge for any reptile keeper that isn't like working full time in animal care. And even if you are, a lot of like typical animal care jobs, like for example, veterinary technicians are very overworked and underpaid. Um, you know, so finances are very tricky for most people working in animal care and animal education. But it's very much based on passion and it's based on drive. And I think that it's super important to be financially literate when you have any animal because you have to make sure that you're planning ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. Because you are responsible for that life and
Right.
they need to be taken care of too. For sure. And if you get to a point where you're not, like you can't afford it, like then it's time to reassess.
Right.
Like just you have to reassess because you have to take care of you too. Like you can't be like, oh my God, I spent my last $50 on a bag of rats. Like
Yeah.
you need to take care of you too. Like
100%. And there's no shame in rehoming because,
Mhm.
you know, reptiles are so accessible.
Mhm.
so accessible at just any pet store, really. And so many people will buy these animals, whether it's for themselves or for their kids, thinking that it's going to be easy, having done no research. And the same thing applies to like small mammals and even birds, unfortunately, because of how accessible they are. And then once they find out that they can't take care of this animal, or that they can't give enough time to this animal, and this is what happened for a lot of my rescues, including my ferret. Um, that's when you should rehome. And the only issue with rehoming is, when you rehome, always make sure that you have a rehoming fee to cover, to make sure that that person can actually pay for this animal. I'm not saying like charge them $500, like $100 rehoming fee. Um, and just ensure that, the person that you are rehoming them to understands that animals care, because there are people who will snatch just any animal up on Craigslist and then flip them. Flippers are a huge thing in the reptile keeping community, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, for sure. That is a tough one. But yeah, rehoming, nothing wrong with it. It's definitely best for the critter.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, let's see. Ooh, here's a great question. If you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self any piece of advice, what would it be?
Um,
No, it wasn't that long ago for you.
no, but a lot has happened in 4 years.
Right.
There are, geez. Okay, I have one piece of advice, but I don't want people to get the wrong idea. There are options outside of the military for you, a lot of options. I do not regret my military service. I don't, because I'm very proud of what I've accomplished. I was in a combat MOS, so not to go down this rabbit hole, I was in a combat MOS, which is very, very recently open to women, and I was not treated with respect for that reason. So I would just, or explore the officer route would be a huge one, because I wanted to be a recon, and I stayed in a combat MOS, but I ended up not being reconnaissance. I was, like I said, combat engineer. So I basically worked with explosives and breaching. And, I would tell myself, like, look into the officer route, go to school, and focus on school. Especially because I would hope that somewhere along the way I would realize animals are my main passion and I can get started much earlier. Um, so like there are other options, Um, but if it was something that pertains to animals, I would tell myself to plan. Plan ahead for every animal you get.
Yes, I think that's excellent advice. And again, thank you for your service. I don't have any military experience myself, but I give you a lot of props for that. So thank you.
Uh, Yeah, I'm, like I said, I'm really proud. I'm really proud of my military service, but there are a lot of, not, again, I'm not going to get on my soapbox here. There are a lot of issues with the culture in the military surrounding women and a whole bunch of things, to be
Yeah,
honest.
no, I totally understand for sure. Um, well, I have one more question for you, and it is, what is one question that I didn't ask you that you wish I asked?
Um,
I know it's
that is a really, oh gosh. I don't even know. I guess I kind of want to nerd out on like the biology of these
Yeah, do it
snakes.
because you said you wrote out all of the phylogeny and stuff.
Yeah,
Read it to me.
like,
Tell me what you wanted to talk about.
well, I just wanted to talk about like certain traits of colubrids, and I'll try to make this as quick as possible because I know
No
we're
worries.
wrapping up here.
Let's do it. I'm excited.
So there is something called a vestigial structure in biology, which is basically something that the ancestors of that animal had, that they no longer need, but is still present. For example, like the pelvic hip bone in whales. Um, Colubrids don't have the vestigial structure of legs. There are, in boas and pythons, remnants of hind legs, and you can see it. It's like little claws by their vent. And colubrids, one of their main traits is that they are completely legless, so they do not have that structure. Additionally, there's a couple things that I think are really interesting about them physically. Like rat snakes, one of the main things that I think is so appealing about them, and corns have this too, but especially rat snakes, is they're like little googly eyes. They have these goofy looking eyes that are just so like almost like they look like googly eyes, like they're almost cartoon like. And I think that that is just so adorable, and makes them very unique compared to like most boas and pythons and snakes, like most venomous snakes. And then their belly scales are strictly horizontal, so they go straight across, and they don't have up until their vent where it just splits into two. So there's a lot of things physically about them that I think is just so interesting. And their scales in general almost look like chainmail.
Yes.
So that's sort of like the very basic things that I think is really interesting about them. Sorry, I'm just like checking my notes because like I'm like I know there's other stuff. They also don't have a left lung, so there's not
Yeah.
a functional left lung. So just some little interesting things that help you, like, I mean, obviously you're not going to be like, does he have a lung when you're trying to identify snakes? But do not use the eyes as an indicator of what species it is, because mambas actually have very similar eyes to rat snakes. If anybody's like seen a mambas, green mambas, black mambas, they also have little googly eyes, and it's very deceptive because they are extremely venomous. But yeah, if you see these guys in America, those are some identifiers. They also have like their head scales are very plate-like, and compared to like my reticulated python, I'm looking at him over there. He has like a whole bunch of scales on their head. They have very few head scales that are very flat and large compared
And I think
to
that's
their boa and python
partly
cousins.
why they're so cool, like when they
Right.
are scaleless, because they usually just have like a few and they kind of look like extra eyeballs. And I think that's so cool looking.
Yeah, I thought about pulling out one of my scaleless just to show, because like it's so I could, like, he's right over there. Um
If you'd like to, we can take a look at your scaleless as a little bonus part at the end of this episode. Yeah,
yeah, I was like, I don't
definitely.
want to hold you hostage.
No, no, bring them out.
Okay,
We're good.
I'll put General Tullius back. He's very squirrely compared to General Tully. Oh, there he goes. Yeah, he's
Oh,
super
such a cool
squirrely.
snake.
This is my scaleless Texas rat snake. I'm trying to get him to look in the camera. Oops.
Oh,
Super
wow.
squirrely. You can see his head scales.
So cool. That's an awesome snake. Oh my God, Lila, thank you for sharing him with us. He's gorgeous.
He's super active. I was talking about how rat snakes are super active. Here you go. He wants
That's a
to
rat
go,
snake.
go, go.
You want to know how they act? That's how they act.
Yeah, he wants to go, go, go. Especially my Japanese rat snake,
Oh,
which is an arboreal species of rat snake. They like I pull him out and he's just zooming.
yes. And here in the office, she's got a blue beauty, and he is also a very active snake.
Oh my gosh, they're beautiful.
They're so
But
gorgeous.
yeah, you
Um,
can see the scales that he still has, and those ventral scales I was talking about are
so you can
present
still get
still.
around, no problem. Oh, I love it. Very cool, Lila. Oh my God, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I think we've had such a great discussion, and we've gone over so much cool stuff. But I'm going to do a little bit of a plug-in for Zen. So if you guys aren't following us here on TikTok, make sure you're following us, and make sure you're following Lila on TikTok. She should be all tagged, the Goblin Queen Lila, or Goblin Queen Lila. Make sure you follow her too. And then we are on a bunch of other social media platforms. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram, we have a YouTube channel, and this will also be on our podcast. So make sure you go to your favorite podcast platform and search for the Zen Exotic Zoo. And I will get this posted up within the next couple days. And I will also have it posted up on our YouTube channel. So yeah, everything's been really great. It's been so much fun chatting. Do you have any more questions for me, Lila?
I don't. I just want to say I'm super grateful that you invited me on, and I was fortunate enough to speak to you for the first time when I was like getting ready for a Halloween party or something, and I'm just really grateful that you invited me on and gave me an opportunity to talk about these amazing critters and hear your experience. I'm very inspired by the fact that like you worked in as a veterinary technician and you're licensed vet tech, and now you work for Zen. Like that is literally so cool, and it's a big inspiration to me. So just thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Oh, Lila, it's been such a pleasure. I thank you so very much. And maybe we'll do another episode on some big snakes later.
Oh my gosh, I would love that. I geek out on my big boys.
Yes. Okay. We'll definitely do that. So thank you all again for watching, and make sure that you follow us and Lila on all of the social media platforms. And we're gonna definitely, I'll take some clips from this so we can post some videos,
Okay.
and Lila, you can share them along as well. All right. Well,
All
it's
right,
been so
thank
good.
you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.